Hello, I think we're live. So congratulations everyone who's managed to join us. It's always good to get through that technology piece at the beginning. Thanks very much for joining this, the latest episode of Growthbusters. It's a series of bite-sized conversations with a variety of B2B experts. And what we like to do on these sessions is explore some key challenges that many of today's B2B marketing and sales teams are focused on and trying to solve. My name is Paul Gibson. I lead the Demandbase business outside of North America, and I'll be hosting this series. In this particular episode, as you're probably aware, we're diving into all things B2B advertising. And to support this important discussion, I'm excited to be joined by a B2B advertising guru, Isaac Atashkar. Now, Isaac, it's great to have you on the session today. I'm looking forward to our discussions. You probably remember when we first met, was it 7 years ago? You were working at Google. So apart from obviously wanting to work with me, which I can understand completely, what is it that persuaded you to leave such a giant and join what I suppose back then was a relatively unknown startup? And as you do that and introduce yourself, it'd be great to get a little bit of a story of your journey up to date.
Yeah, Paul, absolutely. Obviously, apart from your charm and that lovely coffee you invited me to in a glamorous coffee shop somewhere in London. It's been a while now. Putting that aside, personal motivations, I've always had a passion for B2B, right? I've started my career in the world of, B2B sales and business development. In corporate executive board, I kind of moved to Forrester, and that first 10 years of my career was all about sales and marketing. So I developed a deep passion for, helping marketeers, helping salespeople to be successful. And when I moved to Google, I thought, B2B would be the next big thing. And it wasn't really. And Google doesn't really have to care about B2B that much, to get billions from B2C verticals. But what was interesting was that I learned a lot. And there was a lot of people that you would learn a lot from. And Google, obviously being Google, you learn everything from, search, display, programmatic, mobile, in-app, and so on. But what was very interesting throughout my career at Google was this sort of moment when I went to meet a customer and Tableau at that moment, customer got Tableau, and then in that meeting we were looking at how Google would essentially help the customer. And what was interesting was that the customer asked me a question which kind of left me a bit blank. And the customer turned back and showed me their laptop and said, "Can you actually help me understand how would you target these 20 companies?" And I was a bit like, okay, well, they go to Google and they search for your products, right? Like analytics software or analytics software pricing. But then the question was, well, how do we know it's these companies? And I had to get back to them on that. I couldn't really answer that question. So I went back, I did a Google search on advertising to companies, and Demandbase popped up. And I'm like, wow, it's fascinating that there's actually a company out there that does advertising, programmatic advertising, right? Which is very unique, but with a B2B lens. And so I recommended Demandbase to my customer, and I followed Demandbase, and I kept an eye on Demandbase through LinkedIn and so on. And a job popped up, which was a perfect job, which was all around sort of media and advertising, and I applied for it, and here I am after 7 years. So it's been an amazing ride and journey, and I've loved every bit of it.
Brilliant. A great story, and it's really good to have you on the team, Isaac, and you've made a huge difference as we've grown over the years. So I'm really pleased to have you on this session as well. So, okay, let's get started with the meat of the presentation. We'll jump straight into it with the first question, I suppose. I speak to many B2B businesses, and they're spending a significant amount of time, budget, and resource really understanding their ICP. Which companies are they going to go after? Then gaining insight on which ones of those are actually in market right now using intent and things like that. If and how they're engaging with their brand, so that they can actually build an effective and very targeted strategy. And that all makes complete sense, right? But then they spend their advertising budget advertising to everyone, everywhere through a B2C ad network, and probably they waste at least 50% of their spend on companies that they can never actually sell to. And I've never understood this. It makes no sense to me. Now, this approach, it is best, it leads to wasted budget, of course, but it also can deliver a pipeline full of poor fit opportunities that their sales team can't even close. And so underlyingly, it has a negative impact on their key metric, things like close rates. So I suppose first question to you, why do you think so many B2B companies still do this? And why are CEOs and CFOs continuing to throw money and sign off on campaigns where there's so much wastage?
And Paul, it's I completely agree with you, and I'm surprised to still see this even in today's climate, and I think it has to do with the old way of doing marketing, which is lead gen, where marketing's job is to collect hundreds of MQLs so sales can try to do sales to people who don't want to buy right now. We call them low intent leads. So what happens in this scenario is that marketing crushes their MQL target, but sales misses their revenue target. Sales have their views about these leads that aren't that great, and overall it's a poor buyer experience because you get SDRs spamming these companies that aren't even ready to buy. So you got this pipeline full of all of these low intent leads, as you said, and that aren't ready to buy at all. But from a CEO and CFO's perspective, it's a low cost, right? It's a cheap lead. And I think this is where the problem lies, is that you're sort of driving all these cheap leads, and it creates a lot of issues and challenges. So ultimately this leads to even poor funnel conversion metrics, and it's very inefficient to scale. But we think there's a new way to actually think about this, which is, advertising should educate and inform buyers in places where they pay attention. So more buyers would come to you when they're ready to buy. And for this, there has to be a change in the way you think about marketing. What is the definition of advertising or demand gen? Change those types of metrics that would align with, the new buyer experience and the new B2B buyer. And then, of course, execute using different types of activities rather than using B2C ad networks. Start to look at B2B networks. Start to look at B2B demand-side platforms and so on. So you don't need more leads, you need more revenue. And I think top marketeers are really optimizing their marketing mix for business outcomes that matter.
Yeah, great points. We always have the mantra quality over quantity, right? And I think that's so important, especially in a time where the economy is tough, right? And everyone's resources are being cut. So, and it's really interesting because I think we all know B2B is very different than the B2C world, right? And we always have a discussion around, especially in the advertising world, it's so important to differentiate. I mean, I think it's a joke we have sometimes, but if we were selling shoes, we could advertise to pretty much everyone. Same message everywhere that we can. And there's a really good chance it will be the right time for some, but pretty much relevant to all. But B2B is so different, right? I mean, clients will work with only have a certain ICP they can actually sell to. That could be based on an industry, the size of the businesses, the number of employees they've got, regions, etc. And advertising to anyone else outside of that ITP makes no sense, and it is a complete waste. So from your expertise, Isaac, I mean, just give us your thoughts on why it's so important to focus only on those companies your business can actually sell to, and why it's important for B2B businesses to focus on targeted advertising rather than this spray and pray approach.
Yeah, so I'll answer the first part. Why is it so important to focus only on companies that your business can actually sell to? I mean, it's a no-brainer, because if you don't do that, and I see this happening a lot, you'll end up wasting money. The amount of money that goes into buying an impression or a click, especially if we look at, some of these, cost per click for certain keywords, it's in the north of $10. So I think there's a money element involved. You're paying money for impressions, you're paying money for clicks, you're paying money to get your leads. So don't necessarily spend that money on companies that won't buy from you. It's really a no-brainer, and I think that's part of the problem. But secondly, you're wasting a lot of time, people's time. Just imagine the amount of time that goes into building a campaign. Resources involved from building the content, from working with your agencies, campaign manager time, operational time involved. There's so much time invested in running a campaign. Now imagine that goes to the wrong companies that will never buy from you, that aren't even interested to buy from you, that aren't the ideal customer at all. And imagine if you use that time for something else, like an event, you would generate sales. I think that's a huge problem for a business. And then finally, it's bad experience. If you are mass media, right? If you're running a mass media campaign, targeting everyone, using B2C type of data, which is pretty much focused on demographics and interest, you're ultimately delivering a bad experience. You're reaching people that are B2C, right, or consumers. And I see this happening quite often, where I visit a website And the next thing I see is on YouTube, I see ads of that vendor, and I have no idea why they do that. And it's very disruptive. If you ask me, it's very annoying, in fact, because I'm trying to listen to my music, and I see that vendor pop up just because I did a search, or somehow I landed on their website and I wanted to sort of capture some info, and that was it. I'm not in market. I'm not interested. But they disrupt my experience. So you're actually delivering a bad experience, and it's very bad for your brand. And to your second point, why is it so important for B2B businesses to focus on targeted advertising? Because targeted advertising gets you a much better return on every dollar, pound, euro spent. It gives a better experience. And we know that experience differentiates your brand and ultimately drives affinity. And finally, it helps sales, right? I mean, at the end of the day, you want to help sales to generate business, to close these deals. Why else would you be doing advertising? And I think in B2B, there's that missing element of helping sales. A good example here would be a customer, SAP Concur, who had a large universe of accounts to target and a very limited budget to do with it, right? And what they did was to prioritize the list based on intent signals. They then segmented that list into cohorts and launched a very personalized ad campaign. They then shared that list and insights with their colleagues across different departments, sales, and they monitored the metrics to see where is this uplift happening. And that uplift was measured as increased web visits and engagement. I think SAP is definitely a good example of why you shouldn't be advertising to companies that you can't sell to.
Yeah, great points, Isaac. You also hit the nail on the head. It's that sales and marketing alignment, because this down the line has a massive effect on sales. If I've got a pipeline full of opportunities that aren't a good fit, aren't in market, I'll go chasing them because that's the nature of salespeople, right? But the chances are I won't turn them into deals because they're not ready or they're not a good fit. And so my close rates are affected. But sometimes it's even worse if I do close those deals because they're not a great fit. The experience from the customer is very poor. The experience for the people working with them internally, trying to turn that into value, their experience is very poor, and ultimately it can affect your churn rates. So I think you hit the nail on the head there. It's not just a marketing issue, it's very much sales and marketing. So some great points there. Another area to focus on, you spend a lot of time at Demandbase working with startups or smaller companies, as well as the big enterprises that everyone knows and loves. And sometimes maybe they've just received a significant investment, or they're trying to launch a new product or break into new regions, get their name known. And so they spend a big chunk of their budget raising brand awareness, which is great, right? You've got to get that brand awareness and trust. But if I only sell to financial institutions, what's the benefit of me raising brand awareness with a retailer or a manufacturer? And if you went back to the investor, would they be happy knowing that you've probably spent over 50% of that investment on a relevant activity that isn't going to create any revenue? So I think, on that same theme, Isaac, can you share your thoughts around why is it so important to focus on those companies that you can sell to, and why the targeted advertising is so much more effective for things like brand awareness and building trust, because that's a key issue for these organizations?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think, people really tend to ignore the impact on brand. I think brand awareness is so important because it really drives, for affinity and buyers. And up to 97% of the market that are the same guys. How can you engage them? How can you engage them what you do? And also get them to sort of learn about it. One of the problems that they're not going to aware of, you're ignoring the 97% of the market, just focus on what you 3% in the market and spending all your energy and money in there. I think what will happen is that down the line, in the sort of medium term, you're missing out on a lot of demand that you easily have captured by raising awareness about who you are, your value proposition, and how you help different companies in those different industries. So that's very important to understand that brand and demand are actually working with one another. They help one another. And I think sometimes what you see is that a lot of companies tend to sort of ignore that brand and focus too much on, let me capture that demand right now. Let me spend all my money on that, or market, but completely ignore potentially what could be a market next few months. I think that's something that I see quite often with most startups. Understandably, are under pressure from the bigger companies.
Yeah, great points. Thanks, Isaac. I'm not sure if it's my end, but there's a bit of an echo when you're speaking there. So I don't know if you could bang your Mac against the desk and see if that clears it at all. But we'll carry on. Hopefully it was just my end, but it did seem a little bit harder to hear you there than normal. Anyway, let's carry on, and hopefully it's fine. So Isaac, you've been in the advertising space for a long time. You work with a lot of our top B2B clients. Based on your day-to-day experience, can you share maybe some common mistakes that maybe you see B2B businesses make when advertising to their prospects and customers, so people on the call can learn from that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the sort of main mistakes that I see quite often is, case studies. I think that's, for me, very bizarre. Why would you get a case study where, you're the best kept secret? So that's one thing that seems to be a huge mistake is, companies kind of sort of keep their own secrets somewhere hidden, right? So creating case studies, tell the world how great you are, tell the world, how you help other customers, how you help other industries, and drive that, visibility, which I think is very important. I think another mistake I see is misalignment in sales and marketing. People running campaigns without paying for sales. I think this is a huge issue for the B2B, and I think more and more marketers who are really cutting edge have an excellent relationship with sales, have regular meetings with sales. That's another mistake I see. Misalignment between sales and marketing. The other mistake I see is that budget is not aligned with B2B customer journey. And sometimes we get a list of 1,000 companies, and they're all treated the same. There's no slicing and dicing in terms of where they are in the journey. There's no insight in terms of and I think that's an issue, right? That's going to end up, as we spoke about it before, you're going to end up wasting money and wasting time and resources if you're going to ultimately deliver what you're saying. And you're going to show lower funnel messaging to upper funnel, enterprise to SMB, enterprise, all over the place. Really inconsistent experiences. And then a good example I have here is a customer of ours. They don't treat it best practice. Their campaigns are omnichannel. They always run the campaign. They have a very consistent way across paid search, Google, across paid social, LinkedIn, and also programmatic display, which is really the messaging is very consistent. All activates at the same time, and it's just measured around demand funnel. How are these companies through the customer journey, and what are they doing in terms of helping the SDRs book meetings, get positive replies, and ultimately, get salespeople closing.
Yeah, great points again. Again, I hope everyone can hear clearly. It's my end that it's not, but maybe if you can talk just a little bit louder, Isaac, just in case, so we can cover up any problems there might be there. So let's keep the situation moving forward. And I think everyone on the call, and certainly you and I, Isaac, are aware that we're in a tough economic climate right now. And one of the things that seems to be the norm is that the first thing that gets cut is marketing budget and resource. Crazy, I'm sure most of you agree, often has a detrimental effect on the performance of the business itself, and it doesn't seem to make any sense at all. We hear it's often difficult for marketers to prove their value and effectiveness, so that they can protect themselves in the business, especially if they're relying on things like anonymous click-through rates, impressions as their metric of measurement and success. Not really helpful for anyone. If you don't know who's clicking on the ads, how can you say that it's been successful? If you don't know where the impressions are going, how can you say that that's a success? So from your perspective, Isaac, what role does data and analytics play in B2B advertising? And what metrics would you recommend, people on the call today should really focus on to prove their effectiveness to the business and ultimately protect the marketers from these cuts that keep coming.
Yeah, and that's a very, very good point. And I'm sorry about the sound, but that's definitely a valid point. And actually, Mark Ritson, who we all know is a very well-known academic, wrote a very interesting article around the best marketeers will be upping, not cutting their budgets in a depression or in a recession. And I think when you think about that, it does grow a brand's market share. And what Ritson did was based on an older study, which divided firms into 3 groups: those that did not believe in advertising, those that cut back advertising during a recession, and those that increased it. And the results were very interesting. It demonstrated that companies that increased their ad budgets during a recession grew sales much faster than their rivals, not only during that period, but also beyond it. And I think part of all of this is that, in this climate, yes, naturally budgets are cut. But if you think about the impact of advertising based on the example I've just given around that study that was in Ritson's article, it's very interesting that having the right data, having the right analytics in place really helps you as a business to engage those companies that are ideal and in market with your brand. It enables basically you to actually get sales to actually speak to those companies, and I think that's very important, and ultimately convert them into customers. Analytics allows you to track everything that you do from a campaign perspective, and the spend that you have in a campaign and the influence of that on actual revenue. So you're showing, and sort of senior leadership, or everyone outside of marketing and advertising, the contribution that these campaigns are having on revenue and revenue teams. And I think that's very, very important. So having the right analytics, having the right data, really helps you as a business to make sure that you're ahead of your competition. And as I say, data is the new oil. I mean, this is not a new term, right? They've said this for a while, but the same way as oil is raw in its form, data is raw as well. So it has to be used, processed to get that insight. And having those insights is really new money. So you should be definitely advertising to your companies. Don't cut that down. And in B2B advertising, use a combination of first-party data, your third-party data to improve segmentation. So every penny spent will be spent towards companies that are in a specific segment, whether it's upper funnel, mid or lower funnel. So for example, if you want to create a segment for companies that are on your demo page, that could be a great retargeting audience, that you could get them onto a demo page again, so they could speak to sales. Or if you want to create another segment for companies that are researching your competitors using intent data, then do that and run competitive displacement campaigns. So using data, you could be far more smarter and much more effective in terms of running campaigns, and use metrics which the business understands, right? Move away from vanity metrics, clicks and impressions and things like that, and focus on metrics that the business understand. Try to have those monthly reviews, or when you're having those monthly reviews with finance, sales, the board, explain, use 5 very key high-level metrics. How many companies are you advertising to? What percentage have you raised exposure with? How many of those have increased website engagement? What percentage is in pipeline? And how many of those deals are you actually closing? And I think if you keep it at that level, you'll be relevant, but also you wouldn't have to cut down on your advertising.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think that last piece there, I think we've both seen it in action, where you go out to a client and they're sitting with their sales team and they're able to run through those target accounts and one by one say, that account wasn't showing any engagement with us. We then spent $100. We delivered 200 impressions. We got 37 clicks, but then we saw them on our website. They attended this seminar. They saw that piece of creative. They're now talking to sales. That's an opportunity. It's in the pipeline, etc. And attribute it all back from that advertising cadence is just really powerful stuff to see in action. And again, from a marketing perspective, I'd much rather having those conversations. Oh, we got a click-through rate of 0.7%. That's really good. And I hope everyone believes us. Anyway, just really, really good conversations there. So one thing that's always interesting, I think, the most B2B businesses that we speak to focus their advertising efforts primarily on demand gen. Now, we know it's really effective and it's a proven strategy like that, but we've got so many clients that are also using data or your advertising as a key tool for their customers, helping secure renewals, identify and increase their upsell, cross-sell opportunities. Have you got any stories of existing clients that are doing that today?
Yeah, absolutely. I've got two good stories, actually. For retention, Infosys is a very good story. They have their sort of Tyson accounts. These are customers. And to actually ensure that Infosys is the #1 vendor they always select and shortlist for bids, they have always-on campaigns. These always-on campaigns, they never stop, but they change the message. And the message is very much based on, big trends that are happening, in the marketplace, such as AI, right, ChatGPT, and so on. And it's all about protecting the base. It's all about keeping and retaining those huge strategic accounts that represent quite a large portion of their revenue. So Infosys does that very well, and they're really a best practice, a best in class, example. Upsell, cross-sell, I had the pleasure of working with Adobe. Again, they are excellent in terms of how they have their, multiple different clouds, right? They've got the 3 clouds, and, they were able to sort of identify one cloud, customers in that cloud, and try to upsell other clouds to them through, upsell and cross-sell campaigns. So they took all their document cloud customers and run campaigns to show them the Creative Cloud. And that's how they stimulated, discovery, but also pipeline opportunities for sales to actually sell the different products as well. So definitely, I completely agree with you, Paul. I think, again, people tend to focus too much on demand gen and ignore the possibilities of B2B advertising, which could be focused also on retention and upsell and cross-sell, especially in this climate where we all know that, new business is taking longer. Sales cycles are taking longer. It's harder. CFOs are involved. Many more people involved. Everything's under scrutiny. More of a reason why you should be using advertising from an upsell, cross-sell, and retention as strategy. So yeah, completely, agree with that sort of observation, and we definitely encourage more customers to do that as well.
Yeah, great. And it's always nice to have real life customer stories rather than just saying how great this stuff is. Appreciate that. Thank you. We've covered quite a bit in a pretty short space of time, and it may be people out there going, wow, there's so much that's possible here. So what's your advice for people just starting out? Maybe they're working with B2B ads for the first time and want to do test the water before they invest a lot of budget. What advice would you offer there?
Yeah, I would say, if you want to experiment, start with a small budget, try to start with a pilot budget. Some people have experimental budgets, some people don't. You have to think about it differently. But I would say for a good successful pilot, about $15,000, dollars, around about 13 grand in sterling would be a good place to start off with, and have about 100 accounts. But also make sure there's a strategy behind it as well. Typically, we see a good pilot to be either pick a market, pick a product, and work with sales to get input around, the content, around, potentially the landing page and so on. So to collaborate with sales, pick a market, pick a product, and that sort of 15 grand is typically what we recommend as a starter for about 100 accounts.
Yeah, and I know we've done quite a few deals over the last couple of years where we've started with ad first. Let's prove that we can go out and get those companies that you're missing, identify that they're in market, and drive them to your website to prove it before we build out anything else in the platform. So yeah, definitely dipping your toe in the water is something that a lot of people are doing right now. So thanks, Isaac. This has been hugely interesting for me and hopefully for the people listening. Before we close the session out, though, a couple of fun facts about yourself, if I may. Firstly, I know you're very active online. So who do you follow online? What podcasts do you listen to that you think any listeners today could potentially benefit from?
Yeah, I like people that challenge the status quo, right? I've come from Forrester. I spent 6 years there, and it was all about challenging thinking, right? It was all about challenging thinking, drive change. For me, people like, kind of Chris Walker he's definitely a person who challenges that sort of status quo by getting companies to think differently. and it's very much aligned with kind of the way I would think about how to work with other customers. And there are other sort of great content that's being produced by the likes of JB Borrows, but yeah, I think they're very good, and a whole bunch of other people as well. But I think those two would be kind of the people that I would definitely kind of follow and get inspiration from, using LinkedIn, Twitter, and so on. And of course, we've got our own people here at Demandbase. We've got a lot of great content on our Demandbase TV. So I follow that a lot, and I think that's also very good to keep abreast of all the new trends, all the new and emerging sort of great technologies out there. So I think those are the main ones. But I also sort of read a lot around the Marketing Weekly. I follow Gartner, Forrester, and so on. I think that's again very important for me to stay on top of emerging trends and the future of what tech could look like, so like ChatGPT, right, which is really changing things right now, and who knows, we're starting to use it in sales, and who knows what it's going to look like in the next 5 years. So I would say those are the main people that I follow and I listen to.
Yeah, brilliant. And the shameless plug of DBTV was fine. You're all right with that. I think the majority of stuff we have on there is industry specific rather than Demandbase specific. So there's some great stuff there. And ChatGPT, I think we'll have a whole other session on that one. Last question for yourself today. Something that people who don't know you might be surprised to know about Isaac.
That I'm a crazy, cyclist. I've cycled 120 kilometers. That's the most I've done. That's my record. So, I'm a racing cyclist, and I love it. And I'm obsessed with that. And I'm a bit of a geek in terms of buying all the different sort of cycle parts. So yeah, big biker, and whoever's up for it, just ping me on LinkedIn, and I would love to sort of, test you on Strava. So yeah, that's kind of one thing about me.
Yeah, obviously I know a lot about your cycling. Be warned, whoever invites him, he will be wearing lycra, and he gets his coat stolen on a regular basis. So, yeah, listen, I think that was a really fantastic session, Isaac, and I really appreciate you taking the time to talk with me today. I think the message that I got out of it was, let's stop wasting time, budget, and resource chasing companies that our businesses can't and don't even want to sell to. Firstly, it's a waste of budget at a time when none of us can really afford it, but it also creates irrelevant pipelines for sales to chase, which affects their close rates. Even worse, should they actually close one of these forfeit accounts, it'll likely lead to a bad experience for both them, the people supporting them, and as we said earlier, undoubtedly affect renewal rates negatively, which is already, bad news for the business. And report on metrics that mean something, make a difference to your business, and highlight the value that you deliver. This protects you as much as the business during these tough times. So that's it for this session. Thanks ever so much, everyone, for joining and listening today. And look out for other episodes in the Growthbusters series. We've got a few exciting titles coming up, like metrics B2B marketers should be reporting on, demystifying intent, understanding and controlling buyer journeys, and maximizing existing customer revenues. I'm sure you'll all agree they sound like good topics to listen in for. So thanks very much for your time. I appreciate it, and hopefully we'll speak to you all again soon. And remember, we ain't afraid of no growth.
Absolutely.